As you write your life story, you're far from finished. Are you looking to close the book on your job? Maybe turn a page in your career? Be continued at the Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. Our professional master's degrees and certificates are designed to meet you where you are and take you where you want to go. At Georgetown SCS, the learning never stops, and neither do you. Write your next chapter. Be continued at scs.georgetown.edu/podcast.
Hold that serve. There's no time for pickleball because you're going to want to hear this. Noom now has GLP-1s. No way. Oh, yes way, Fred. Psychology and meds. That's how Noom helps you lose the weight and keep it off.
That's really smart.
Oh, Danny, it's Noom smart. And they start at just $149 and they're shipped to your door in 7 days.
Holy smokes, that's fast.
But not as fast as my service game. Hey, who's ready to get pickled?
Get started with Noom GLP-1 today. Not all customers will medically qualify for prescription medications. Compounded medications are not reviewed by the FDA for safety, efficacy, or quality.
A couple of weeks ago, I was searching for video for a story, and I found something that I thought you would want to hear. Several months ago, I went on a tour of the notable locations of Andrew's Raid, more commonly known as the Great Locomotive Chase. It was a fascinating day for sure. Now, if you know the history, you probably know that several of the Andrews Raiders are buried at the Chattanooga National Cemetery. That's where the tour finished. As we were approaching the cemetery on a bus, retired 4-star General B.B. Bell gave us a history of the cemetery and of the Battle of Missionary Ridge during the Civil War. The ridge overlooks a cemetery near downtown Chattanooga. Today on the show, I wanted you to hear that audio. Now remember, we're on a bus, so it's a bit noisy in there, but you can still clearly hear General Bell's remarks. My name is Josh Rowe, and this is Tomorrowtown, Tennessee.
A stunningly important national historical place in the United States of America for a lot of reasons. And let me just cover it first before we talk about Andrews Raiders, because even though we all live in Chattanooga, we may not know much about one of our great historical locations, other than it's a VA cemetery and a bunch of people are buried out there. As you all know, the big Battle of Chickamauga in the fall of 1863 happened just down the road here, where after some federal successes, particularly in the West, the Confederate Army finally produced a stunning victory just south of Chattanooga over the Confederate forces. And the Confederate forces ran in disarray from the battlefield and headed for Chattanooga, which they thought they could defend and would be a safe place for themselves. I meant the federal forces, of course. The Confederates were going to follow them up. However, General Thomas, who is a famous guy, rallied some of the federal forces on the battlefield at Chickamauga, slowed down the Confederate assault on Chattanooga, and he became known by his troops and America as the Rock of Chickamauga. That's important because he plays a crucial role in the establishment of this cemetery up there. So the one good guy from the federal side that came out of the Battle of Chickamauga, who became a storied general, was this guy Thomas. Nonetheless, soon after that battle, and after the Confederates had encircled Chattanooga and laid siege to it, Lincoln fired all the generals running the federal army except Thomas and hired Grant to come from the western part of Tennessee and Mississippi, and take over the federal army in Chattanooga with the express mission of breaking out of Chattanooga and then attacking south into the South to disrupt the South in their heartland. So sure enough, Grant infiltrated from the west, and it was a real infiltration. It's a great story if you ever run out of things to do, to read how this very now becoming famous general had to sneak into Chattanooga, across the river, hills and dales, etc. But he finally got here, took over, and began to rally his troops, establish a supply line, and prepare to break out of Chattanooga. And we all know the breakout consisted of fundamentally clearing the Confederates from Lookout Mountain, known as the Battle Above the Clouds, and then sweeping across Missionary Ridge and throwing the Confederate Army back to the south, and all these fights that lasted on the way down to Atlanta. But having said that, there were a couple of three generals working for Grant at the time who became very famous. One was Thomas, and for the breakout over Missionary Ridge, he was given the center sector. So when we're in the cemetery, that's kind of where Thomas's army was, looking at Missionary Ridge. Sherman, the guy who took over the army when Grant left, we'll get to that, had the army, his own army, on the north side of Thomas, and his mission was to conduct an envelopment from the north and roll the Confederates up on Missionary Ridge, coming north to south along the ridge, while Thomas demonstrated in front of the ridge to fix the Confederate forces in place. Meanwhile, a guy named Hooker was going to come up from the south, all these three under Grant's command, and he was going to envelop the Confederate lines from the south. He had fought and cleared Lookout Mountain and then cleared the valley that afternoon and was positioned to attack Missionary Ridge from the south. So he had a classic demonstration fixing fight in the middle, Thomas, and a double envelopment, which is unique in American history, something we teach. It's a really cool thing to do, but hard to do. But Grant set it up, and sure enough, the next day, after the forces were in place, he launched the attack on Missionary Ridge. Thomas' army fought to the east, got to the base of the mountain, and were standing there saying to themselves, we're not really facing any opposition. So they knew they could do something. To the north, God bless him, Sherman's army was in disarray, had run into all kinds of Confederate forces. They also got lost in the hills up there on the Amnicola Highway in 153, if you know where that area is. They got lost in there, and their envelopment became disorganized, and they never got in the fight. So Sherman's great army never fought that day, except in small skirmishes. Meanwhile, Hooker from the south did execute an envelopment from the south, but it was blocked well. So the double envelopment, which never fails, failed horribly. However, the fixing attack, the frontal attack, Thomas in the middle, which never works, ever, forget it, worked perfectly for reasons that people still talk about today, and without orders, because Thomas's troops were ordered to hold their position at the base of the ridge. With no orders, they said, we're going on up the ridge because there's no sense of sitting here at the bottom when there's nobody in front of us. The Confederacy had moved forces to the north and south to block the double envelopment, leaving the center weak. And Thomas's army went right over the top and routed the Confederates, thus winning that battle. The reason I go through all that is for the Battle of Lookout Mountain, the big hill in the center of what is now the Chattanooga National Military Cemetery is where Grant had his tactical command post. So that's a famous hill.
Thank you for listening to Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of News Channel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. I hope you join me again real soon.